this 10-mark question, which is 6C. So profit maximization is assumed to be the business objective of most firms. I agree with that. So with reference to Extract A, assess whether this is the case for coffee shop owners. So it's very clear this question is on business objectives. Now, if I was to think about coffee shops, I kind of think a bit more of an ethical firm maybe, since a lot of them care about, I don't know, just general ethics. And what are some other business objectives that these firms can pursue? So I'm kind of thinking along the lines of profit satisfying, as if you think about your local coffee shop that maybe like a family owns, they're not exactly trying to be Amazon. They're not trying to make massive super profits and live in mansions. They just want to kind of pay their bills, like enjoy the day job and get on with it. Like a nice little shop. So profit satisfying. They'll make a certain amount of profit just to keep their firm running, and then not really care too much about profit. And maybe then pursue other objectives like donating to local charities, etc. But then some other objectives I can definitely think about is something like a total opposite of profit satisfying, which is revenue maximizing. And why is that? And I'm thinking about firms like Starbucks, Costa, these large incumbent firms that maybe are trying to force other firms out of the market and pursuing objectives like revenue maximizing. I can also think about things like predatory pricing, which maybe could be mentioned in the extract. But 100% with regards to this question, I am going to have a read of Extract A to see what they are referring to, since it could be any of these. And yeah, let's have a look at that. So Extract A is here. And yeah, let's see what business objectives these firms are pursuing. So first mention of anything is that consumers are placing quality coffee over convenient location. And yeah, these independent shops, they pursue a luxury experience for customers rather than just like the factory line production of like Starbucks. Or like Starbucks, like all these big coffee shops are basically like McDonald's, where you just get your food. It's not really a luxury experience, whereas local coffee shops, they provide you with more of the experience and like better quality. And it mentions how these independents are not doing too well, and they do sometimes go out of business. And then talks about the Coca-Cola takeover, where they're trying to maximize long-term returns to shareholders, which is quite vague, which could be, of course, and it does kind of align with the profit maximization objective. But then it could, if we're maximizing long-term returns, we could maybe in the short term pursue sales max, revenue max, to try and maybe take more market power, and then in the long term move back to profit maximizing when we have that established market power. And in conclusion, the extract is not great, but it'll help us pick up those 2 application marks. But remember, this 10-mark question, if we remember back to the mark breakdown, is 6 KA marks and 4 evaluation marks. And with this question, all these objectives, what diagram do they relate to? That monopoly diagram. You can show the revenue max, the sales max, of course the profit max, and that is really, as long as you include it in your analysis, that is where you pick up the KA marks from. So 100%, the first thing I pretty much do with this question is draw out the monopoly diagram, and yeah, we'll demonstrate here. So of course with the monopoly diagram, we have cost/revenue on the y-axis, just write it out in your exam, and quantity on the x-axis, D equals AR curve, MR twice as steep as your AR curve, the nice little AC, and MC. And now let's get into the nitty gritty and label up these points. So of course always start with the first one, which is profit maximization, which is where I want to draw that a bit differently, where MC equals MR, which is of course this point here. Then how do we work out the price where we profit maximize? We go up from that point there, and then we go left. This will now give us P max, and that quantity there will be Q max. And now we go up from Q max to find our box of supernova profit. So go up from Q max until we hit our AC curve, and that is our box of super normal profit. Bang. So that is our first objective, and that's pretty much the main objective you're going to be speaking about. Maybe here do 2 paragraphs, one about profit maximizing, and then one about a different objective. The other objective I would pick, you can either pick sales marks, you can pick revenue mark, but the one I would pick, just due to this little mention in the extract, which is maximizing long-term returns, I would pick sales maximizing, because when we're sales maximizing, of course, we're trying to make as many sales without making a loss, and the whole aim of sales maximizing is to increase market share. So if we're trying to increase the long-term returns for the shareholders, likely in the short run we're pursuing sales maximizing, trying to maximize the market share in the short run, and then like I said, in the long run we move back to profit maximizing, meaning that we use that market share we've built up, and then we can almost exploit consumers. Now we have that loyal fan base, that loyal market share. And where do we find sales maximizing? Sales maximizing is of course found, remember what I said, it's where a firm maximizes sales without making a loss, which of course would be where D equals AR is equal to AC. And just for a bit of understanding, that can actually be used in your bigger essays. Maybe a 15-mark question comes up on this, or a 25-mark question comes up on this. Why is sales maximizing where AC equals AR? Because remember, what is AC? AC is cost per unit. What is AR? AR is average revenue per unit. Therefore, if we produce at any higher quantity, the average revenue, basically the price of the unit, drops below the cost per unit. Thus, we're making a loss on each unit. So this is why sales max is the maximum we can produce without making a loss on each unit. And then, of course, just work out the price for sales max. So just put P sale, whatever you want to put, and then Q sale. And the way you could do this is, again, using the application we picked up. First paragraph, you could disagree with the statement. You say, I disagree that the main objective for firms is profit maximizing, as in the short run, to boost market share, firms will sales max. And then just, of course, include the diagram, use it in your chain of analysis, explain what sales maxing is step by step. And then your second paragraph, you'd say, then you can say, I agree that firms in the long run will profit maximize, as they will use that increased market share they've gained from sales maximizing in the short run to then exploit consumers, I don't know, make these large boxes of supernova profit in the long run. And as long as you have those two separate references to the extract, picking up your 2 application marks, that is more than enough for those 6 KAA marks. And then, of course, for this question, you do have your 4 evaluation marks. So the first thing that pops to mind is actually the extract. And like I said, whenever you're evaluating, always try to use your extract. Is this mention here that we're saying that the firm's main objective is to profit maximize, when in reality, most of these firms are struggling to stay in the business. So therefore, their main objective may not be profit maximizing. It may just be like remaining in the market, trying to survive in the market. So you could say, however, in evaluation, this depends on whether the firm's main objective is not profit maximizing due to harsh market conditions and is actually just staying in the market. And the massive one we did plan but we haven't mentioned, you could say, how in evaluation, this depends on whether a firm is profit satisfying, as it may make a certain amount of profit to satisfy shareholders, then pursue other objectives. For example, Microsoft spending, I don't know, 100 million on planting trees, or like environmental objectives. So just like a little example, that's 100% a valid evaluation. But of course, there are other evaluation points, like a great one, of course, will be divorce of ownership and control. But yeah, anything here, as long as you have 2 points within one really developed evaluation point, you will pick up those 4 evaluation marks. And yeah, that is all I have for the 10-mark question.